I had always dreamed of moving to this city for college. My parents were hesitant at first, but eventually they agreed. The first thing I did was secure a room in a girls' hostel near campus. It seemed perfect. Small, quiet, and affordable. When I arrived, the warden showed me to my room. Room 304, she said. It's been empty for years. I raised my eyebrows. Empty? Why? She just shrugged. No one ever wanted it. Some say it's a little strange. I laughed nervously, assuming it was just superstition. After all, I wasn't the type to be scared of an empty room. The room itself was normal. A simple bed, a desk, and a small wardrobe. The window faced the courtyard, where other girls were laughing and talking. I unpacked my things, but even as I arranged my books, I couldn't shake the feeling that the room was too quiet, almost like it was listening. That night, just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard it. Soft, deliberate footsteps in the corridor outside my door. I froze, my heart was hammering. It was in T, the usual sound of girls walking to the bathroom or coming back from study halls. These steps were deliberate, slow, and measured, stopping right outside my door. I waited, holding my breath, staring at the door, and then, silence. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. Maybe someone was just passing by. I told myself it was just an old building. Old floors make strange noises. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few nights, the footsteps became more frequent. Every night, exactly around 2:17 a.m., they would start. Slow steps pacing back and forth outside my door. I started keeping a small flashlight and my phone next to the bed. I wanted to record it, maybe show the warden, but a strange feeling always held me back, like something new I was watching. One night, I mustered the courage. I quietly moved to the door and peeked through the keyhole. Nothing, but then I noticed it. The doorknob moving ever so slightly, as if someone were gently testing it. My stomach churned. I backed away. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak, every sigh of the old building made me jump. I tried to tell myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I was a new girl, alone for the first time in my life. Hostel life was supposed to be exciting, right? But then I realized something worse. It wasn't just the footsteps. Sometimes I would see shadows move across the window when no one was outside. My desk drawer would be slightly open in the morning, even though I had closed it the night before. I confided in my roommate, Sarah, a friendly senior girl. She laughed at first. Old hostels get to you. Don't take it so seriously. But one night, she stayed over because her room's plumbing broke. Around 2 a.m., the footsteps began. She froze. Her face went pale. "I hear it too," she whispered. That's when I realized I wasn't imagining it. The following days, I tried to gather courage. I stayed up, phone ready, waiting for the footsteps. When they came, I raised the camera and pointed it at the door. The door handle rattled. Then silence. I checked the recording in the morning. Nothing at all. I started researching room 304. The previous occupant, a girl named Mira, had lived there 5 years ago. She had disappeared one night. The authorities never found her. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Was this why the room was vacant for years? That night, the footsteps came again. Louder, closer. This time, there was something else. A soft knock. 3 taps. Like someone was testing my patience. I whispered to Sarah, "We should leave." I'm not staying here. But curiosity. Some part of me wanted to see who or what it was. I decided to stay up and wait. I sat on the bed, camera ready. The footsteps approached, stopping right outside the door. I held my breath. Then I heard a soft voice whisper, "Please." My heart stopped. It sounded like a girl whispering my name. The door handle began to turn slowly. My camera fell from my hand in shock. I ran out of the room and down the stairs, barely able to breathe. The hostel was empty. But the footsteps followed me, echoing in the corridor, stopping just behind me. Sarah ran to catch me. "What is happening?" she cried. "We never found anyone." But from that night on, the footsteps never stopped. Not for me. Not for anyone who dared enter room 304. Eventually, I moved out. But I couldn't forget the room. I still get chills when I think about the soft knocks, the whispers, the shadows that moved when no one was there. The hostel still stands, and room 304 remains empty. But sometimes, late at night, students hear footsteps outside the door, stopping, waiting. If you think you're brave enough, maybe one day you'll dare to stay there. But remember, room 304 never forgets. Story number 2. I had just joined a new girls' hostel near my college campus. It was my first week, and everything felt exciting, yet intimidating. The building was old, with narrow corridors and wooden floors that creaked with every step. My room was on the second floor, at the far end of the hallway. That night, I was alone in my room. My roommate had gone home for the weekend, leaving me by myself. I had always been independent, but there's something unnerving about being alone in a new place. Around 11:30 p.m., I felt the urge to use the bathroom. I grabbed my phone and flashlight, telling myself it was silly to be scared. As I walked down the corridor, I heard something. Soft footsteps behind me. My heart skipped a beat. Probably one of the other girls coming back late. I tried to reason. But the hallway was completely dark, and when I turned around, no one was there. I shook my head, laughed nervously, and continued toward the bathroom. Then I heard it again. Footsteps following me. They weren't random. They mirrored my own pace, stopping whenever I stopped. I quickened my pace, but so did the footsteps. My breath became shallow, and my flashlight flickered slightly. Finally, I reached the bathroom. I stepped inside and locked the door, trying to convince myself it was just a prank by some mischievous senior. But then I heard something that froze me. A faint, desperate scream echoed from one of the stalls. My hand trembled as I shined my flashlight toward the sound. The stall was empty. There was no one inside. My heart pounded in my chest, and I backed away toward the door, unsure whether to run or investigate. I thought maybe it was my imagination, or perhaps the sound had traveled from somewhere else. But the scream repeated, soft but clear. "Help. Please." I almost dropped my flashlight. I pressed my back against the wall, feeling the chill crawl up my spine. I wanted to leave, but curiosity held me there. The thought of someone trapped, needing help, wouldn't let me go. I slowly approached the stall, my fingers brushing the cold metal door. I called out softly, "Hello? You okay?" Silence. Just the echo of my own voice bouncing back at me. I decided to leave and dash back to my room. As I turned to go, I caught a glimpse of something in the mirror, a shadow moving behind the last row of stalls. I spun around, flashlight raised, but again, there was nothing. The next day, I asked the warden about the bathroom. She gave me a strange look. "That bathroom has always been different," she said. "Some girls avoid it at night because they say they hear things." I forced a laugh, trying to hide the panic rising inside me. But that night, I couldn't ignore it. The footsteps returned. I felt them outside my door first, slow, deliberate. I watched the hallway with wide eyes, phone clutched to my chest. When I finally got up to use the bathroom, the footsteps followed me again. And when I reached the bathroom, the scream echoed once more, louder this time. It was as if the sound had become alive, knowing I was there. I realized it was just random noises or imagination. Something was deliberately trying to get my attention. Something that had been trapped, or perhaps waiting for me. Over the next few nights, the screams became more distinct. They seemed to shift in tone, almost pleading, almost angry. Sometimes I swore I could hear whispers. Footsteps pacing back and forth in the hallway, pausing just outside the bathroom door, as if someone or something was testing me. I tried telling my friends, but no one believed me. "It's an old building," they said. "Your imagination is running wild." But I knew what I heard. I knew what followed me in the hallways. One night, I decided to stay in the bathroom until I could see who or what was making the sounds. I sat on the cold floor, phone flashlight illuminating the stalls. The screams started softly, then grew closer, as if circling me. My heart raced. Then I saw it. A figure, barely visible in the shadows, standing at the far end. A girl, pale, with wet hair hanging over her face. She stared at me without moving, and I felt a chill like no other. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My legs refused to move. The figure raised a hand, pointing toward one of the stalls, then vanished into thin air. I didn't dare check the stall. I bolted out of the bathroom, ran down the corridor, and slammed my door shut. I never stayed in that bathroom alone again. But sometimes, at night, I still hear soft footsteps outside my door, echoing down the corridor, and every so often, a faint scream that sounds like it's calling my name. If you ever stay in a hostel and hear footsteps following you to the bathroom, never ignore them. Some doors should never be opened. Some screams are real. Some shadows never leave. Story number 3. I had just settled into my new hostel room. The excitement of moving to a new city for college still buzzing in my head. It was a quiet building, old but charming, with narrow hallways and creaking wooden floors. My room was at the far end of the second floor, tucked away where hardly anyone passed. I had always been an independent person, but there's something unsettling about being alone in a new place, especially at night. That first night, I stayed up studying, my phone casting a soft glow across my desk. The corridors were silent, the occasional creak of the building the only sound. I told myself it was normal. Old buildings always made noises. Exactly at 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by a soft knock at my door. Just one knock, then silence. My heart raced. I told myself it was probably my imagination, maybe a branch hitting the window or a senior playing a prank. But instinct told me something was off. I stayed completely still for a few minutes, listening. The air in the room felt heavier, and the usual comforting silence had turned suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. Slowly, I reached for my phone, holding it like a shield. The knock came again, soft, intentional. This time, I could swear I heard it from right outside my door, followed by the faintest whisper of movement in the hallway. I debated whether to open the door. Curiosity fought with fear. I told myself if I peeked, I'd see someone. Maybe another girl or a senior trying to scare me. Slowly, I turned the knob and opened the door. The hallway was empty, completely silent. No one in sight. Only a single set of wet footprints glistened faintly in the dim light, leading away down the corridor and disappearing around the corner. My stomach dropped. Who had been here? And where had they gone? I backed into my room and locked the door, shaking. I tried to convince myself it was just a prank or someone passing by. But something deep inside me whispered that this was different. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak, every sigh of the old building made me jump. Over the next few nights, I tried to ignore it. I convinced myself that nothing would happen again. But exactly at 3 a.m., the knock returned. Once, then twice, always soft, always deliberate. Each time, the footprints appeared, wet and glistening, leading down the empty hallway. I started keeping a small flashlight and my phone next to the bed. I thought about calling the warden or my roommate, but a strange feeling held me back, almost like something new I was watching. One night, I decided to wait. I hid behind my door, flashlight in hand, heart hammering. At exactly 3 a.m., the knock came. I held my breath. A shadow flickered at the end of the corridor. Then the footsteps began. Soft, deliberate steps moving toward the door. They stopped, faint whisper floated through the hallway, almost like a name being called. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I couldn't move. My mind raced. Was it a person or something else? Something not meant to be seen. The following day, I asked the warden about that wing of the hostel. She frowned. "That corridor has a history," she said quietly. "Years ago, a girl disappeared here. No one ever saw what happened. Some of the girls say her spirit still roams the halls." That night, I stayed awake, too afraid to sleep. At 3 a.m., the knock came again. I waited. Slowly, the wet footprints appeared outside my door. They didn't move down the hallway this time. They stopped, as if waiting. I felt a cold presence, like someone was watching me. I mustered the courage to open the door a little. Nothing. The footprints led to the end of the corridor and stopped abruptly. I could see the faint outline of a girl, pale and soaked, standing at the corner before vanishing into thin air. I ran back to my room, locked the door, and called my roommate to stay with me. The presence lingered. Even with her there, I could feel eyes watching from the corridor. The knocking returned, faint but constant, each night at 3 a.m. Eventually, I moved out. But even now, whenever I hear a knock in the middle of the night, I can't help but remember the footprints leading away down the empty hallway. And I still wonder, who or what knocks at exactly 3 a.m.? And why does it always stop outside the door of room 304? Story number 4. I had just moved into the girls' hostel for my first year of college. The room was small but cozy, with a single bed, desk, and a window overlooking the courtyard. My roommate had gone home for the weekend, leaving me alone for the first time since I arrived. The building was old. Wooden floors, narrow hallways, and walls that seemed to whisper with every creak. That night, I settled in to finish some homework. The room was unusually quiet, almost too quiet. Around 11:30 p.m., I heard faint footsteps in the corridor outside my door. I froze. Normally, I wouldn't think much of it, but these footsteps were deliberate, slow, and precise. They stopped right outside my door. My heart thumped in my chest as I held my breath, listening. I thought about peeking through the keyhole or just ignoring it, but something felt wrong. I grabbed my phone and shined its light under the door. Nothing. The steps seemed to vanish as suddenly as they appeared. I shook my head and tried to convince myself it was the building settling, old floors reacting to the cold night. Later, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the same sound. Footsteps outside my door, stopping right there. I waited, terrified, but this time I felt a cold draft against my door, as if someone was pressing against it. My hands trembled as I reached to check the lock. To my horror, the door handle wouldn't budge. The door was locked from the outside. My breath caught. I banged on it, shouting for my roommate, but the hall was silent. No response, no sound of anyone walking away. Just the cold, pressing presence right outside. I tried every way to open it, pulling, twisting, even kicking gently. Nothing worked. Panic started to set in. I called the warden on my phone, whispering urgently. She told me she would be right there. But I couldn't hear anyone in the corridor, just the faintest echo of footsteps retreating. Morning came slowly. When the warden arrived, she inspected the door. "No one was on this floor last night," she said, her face pale. I checked every corner. I insisted someone had locked me in, but she shook her head. The locks had never jammed before, and no one was here. I moved out temporarily, but curiosity made me return the following night. I stayed awake, waiting. At exactly 3:15 a.m., the footsteps returned. Stopping right outside my door, I felt that same cold pressure. I dared not touch the handle. I just sat on my bed, shaking, whispering to myself that it would pass. Suddenly, a faint tapping began on the door. Slow, deliberate, like someone testing my patience. I counted. 3 taps, then silence. I couldn't see anything in the corridor. My phone's flashlight barely reached past the threshold. I could feel my heart pounding louder than the silence. For weeks, the same thing repeated. Footsteps, locked door, silence. Each night, the hallway seemed darker, the air colder. Occasionally, I thought I saw a shadow move past the end of the corridor. Sometimes, a faint whisper, almost like a girl's voice, floated through the hallway. I never figured out who or what had locked the door. Even after I moved out permanently, the story of room 304 spread through the hostel. Girls reported the same phenomenon. Footsteps stopping outside doors, locks failing, shadows in the corridor. Some refused to walk down the hall at night. Some even moved rooms. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had opened the door in the middle of the night. What waited outside? Was it real, or something trapped from the past? One thing is certain, the locked door never forgets. Story number 5. I had just started my first semester at college and moved into a girls' hostel. It was a new experience, exciting, nerve-wracking, and a little lonely. My room was on the 3rd floor at the far end of the hallway. The building was old, with narrow corridors and wooden floors that creaked with every step. The first few nights were uneventful. I would fall asleep to the soft hum of the city outside. But one night, around 2 a.m., I was awoken by the faint sound of footsteps in the corridor outside my room. They were deliberate, slow, and seemed to pause right outside my door. I froze, listening. Then I heard it, a faint whisper. It wasn't the usual creaks or distant voices. It was soft, almost pleading, calling my name, Emily. My heart skipped a beat. Kay sleeps just a few doors down, didn't stir. She didn't hear anything. I told myself it was my imagination, that I was just alone in a new place and my mind was playing tricks. But the whisper came again, a little clearer this time. Emily, please. I gripped my blanket, paralyzed. The footsteps remained outside my door, slow, deliberate. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the wind or the building settling. But every instinct screamed that it wasn't normal. I decided to peek through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Nothing, no shadows, no movement. Just the faint echo of my own heartbeat. I backed away, shivering. Over the next few nights, the footsteps and whisper continued. Always at the same time, always calling my name, always stopping right outside my door. No one else ever heard it. My roommates began to notice my restless nights and asked if I was all right. I lied, saying it was stress or the new environment. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my flashlight and quietly opened my door. The corridor was empty. I followed the faint sound of the whisper, tracing it to the stairwell. I shone my flashlight down the steps, but there was nothing. The whisper grew fainter, and then silence. I returned to my room, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. But later, while researching the hostel's history, I discovered something chilling. Years ago, a girl named Leela had stayed in my exact room. She had disappeared one night, never to be seen again. Many girls whispered that her spirit still lingered, trying to reach someone who would hear her. That night, at exactly 2 a.m., the footsteps returned. I didn't wait. I grabbed my blanket and curled up in the corner of my room, clutching my phone. The whisper came again. Emily. This time, it was louder, more desperate, closer. I could feel a cold draft brush past me, like someone was leaning over my shoulder. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. I sat there trembling until the first light of dawn broke through the window. The whisper faded. The footsteps disappeared. I never told my roommates the full story. Some nights, I could still hear faint whispers in the corridor when the hostel was quiet. They always call my name, always just for me. Even after I moved out, I think about that room. I sometimes wonder if Lila is still trying to reach someone who will hear her, someone who will understand. And I know now, some whispers are never meant to be ignored. Story number 6. I had just started college and moved into a girls' hostel. My room was on the second floor, tucked away at the far end of a long, narrow hallway. The building was old. Wooden floors, flickering lights, and long corridors that always seemed to whisper when I walked through them alone. The first few nights were peaceful, but then I started noticing strange things. Footsteps outside my door late at night, soft creaks from the hallway, and shadows moving just out of the corner of my eye. At first, I thought it was the usual sounds of an old hostel. But one night, I woke to the sound of deliberate footsteps pacing outside my door. I held my breath, frozen under my blanket. Then I heard a faint knock, soft but deliberate. I told myself it was probably a ghost. After all, the previous occupant had left mysteriously years ago. The next night, the same thing happened. Footsteps outside my door, soft knocks, then silence. It was always at the same time, around 2:30 a.m. I tried to tell myself it was the building settling, or my imagination, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I told my roommate about it. She laughed nervously. It's probably nothing, just ghosts or old floors. But the more it happened, the more I started feeling watched. The sensation was subtle at first, like someone was always just behind me, waiting. I began to feel unsafe. My heart would race every time I stepped out of the room, every time I heard a floorboard creak. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. The footsteps always came at night, stopping right outside my door. After a week, the hostel management installed CCTV cameras in the hallways. I hoped it would give me peace of mind. At first, I watched the footage during the day and saw nothing unusual, just the usual night staff and students walking past. Then one night, I stayed up, phone in hand, pretending to sleep. I wanted to see if the footsteps would come. At exactly 2:32 a.m., I heard them. Slow, deliberate, stopping right outside my door. My phone camera was ready. I opened the hallway footage from the CCTV the next day and froze. There he was, a man standing silently outside my door, completely still, just watching. He was tall, thin, and wearing dark clothes. My stomach dropped. My first thought, how long has he been doing this? I showed the footage to the warden. Her face turned pale. That man, he's been reported before, she whispered. He sneaks in at night targeting girls' rooms, but he's never been caught. My blood ran cold. The following nights, I was terrified. Every creak, every whisper of the wind outside felt like him approaching. I would hide under my blanket, phone ready, heart pounding. I couldn't sleep. Every knock, every shadow in the hallway sent shivers down my spine. I started taking precautions, locking the door multiple times, putting my chair against it, keeping my phone close. But the fear never went away. Even when I walked past the CCTV camera during the day, I could imagine him lurking in the shadows, waiting for night to fall. One night, I stayed awake until dawn. The footsteps came again. I held my breath, listening. They stopped outside my door, and I heard the faintest scrape of the doorknob. My body froze. I couldn't scream. I could feel his presence pressing against the door, testing, waiting. After that, I moved rooms immediately. But even now, I feel the chill whenever I think of that hallway. The sound of footsteps in an empty corridor. The way someone could be standing silently just outside your door, waiting. It's a fear that never leaves you. Even after leaving, I check doors twice, every night, making sure they are locked. Because I know he's still out there, somewhere, watching, waiting. And that's what makes it worse. Knowing that sometimes the danger isn't supernatural, but real.
Story No. 7. I had just moved into a girls' dorm at Maplewood University in Seattle, Washington for my freshman year. My roommate Olivia was friendly and outgoing, but she had one strange habit. Every night, without fail, she would get up at exactly 2 a.m. At first, I thought it was just her studying or going to the bathroom, but it quickly became unsettling. The first few nights I would hear her quietly slipping out of bed. Footsteps down the dimly lit dorm hallway followed soon after, soft but deliberate. I stayed awake, pretending to sleep, trying to see where she went. But whenever I peeked through the peephole, the hallway was completely empty. I asked her about it one morning. She laughed nervously and said, "Sometimes I can't sleep. I just walk a bit. It helps me clear my mind." I nodded, though deep down I felt uneasy. Something about her nightly walks didn't feel right. Then a week later, things escalated. One night I woke to Olivia getting out of bed at 2 a.m., like always. Curiosity got the better of me and I followed quietly. Her footsteps were slow, steady, and they didn't stop at the usual spots. She seemed drawn to a part of the dorm I had never noticed before, a narrow, dim corridor near the east stairwell that led to some unused storage rooms. I hesitated at the doorway, heart pounding, as her silhouette disappeared around the corner. I wanted to follow, but fear rooted me in place. The hallway then fell completely silent. No footsteps, no whispers. Nothing, the kind of silence that presses against your chest. The next morning, Olivia didn't return to our room. Panic set in. When I checked her bed, it was perfectly made, as if she had never slept there. Her belongings were untouched. I called her name, but there was no response. I ran to the dorm supervisor, Miss Reynolds, explaining what happened. She frowned, pale. "Olivia? No one's been in that corridor all night. The security cameras showed nothing. She never left the room." My stomach turned. "But I heard her footsteps. I saw her leave," I protested. Over the next few nights, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every distant whisper made my heart race. At 2 a.m. I would wake, hoping to see Olivia or to understand what had happened, but the hallway remained empty. Her bed stayed perfectly made, as if she had never existed. One night, curiosity overcame fear. I grabbed my flashlight and phone and waited at the end of the corridor. At exactly 2 a.m. I heard it, soft, deliberate footsteps moving toward me. I shone my flashlight, expecting to see Olivia. Nothing. Just a shadow flickering at the edge of the light. Then a faint giggle, like someone whispering a secret, and the footsteps vanished. My heart raced. I ran back to my room, locking the door behind me. The next morning, Miss Reynolds checked the corridor again. "Nothing," she said, shaking her head. "It's like someone's walking there, but no one is." I didn't sleep that day. Weeks passed and Olivia never returned. No one knew where she went. Some students whispered that the east stairwell corridor was haunted, that the footsteps belonged to someone trapped between this world and the next. I tried to dismiss it, but I couldn't forget how her bed stayed perfectly made, her presence lingering as if she had never left. Yet I knew she had walked down that hallway one last time into the unknown. Even now, whenever I hear footsteps at 2 a.m., I wake up, heart racing. Sometimes I swear I hear a familiar giggle or see the shadow of someone walking past my door. And I know, whatever happened to Olivia, it's still here at Maplewood University, waiting for the next curious girl to follow the sound of the disappearing footsteps.
Story number 8. I had just started my sophomore year at Hawthorne College in Portland, Oregon, and was staying in the girls' dorm. The building was old, with narrow hallways, creaking floors, and dim emergency lights that flickered occasionally. I had moved into room 212 at the far end of the second floor. The first week was normal, though the building always gave me a strange feeling at night. It was quiet, almost unnaturally quiet. I had a roommate, Madison, who seemed friendly but kept odd hours. She often stayed up late reading by the window or wandering the halls. One morning, as I walked down the corridor to get breakfast, I froze. Red footprints were splattered across the floor. Not just any footprints. They were bright, fresh, and led directly to my room. My heart raced. The prints stopped right at my door, but there was no one there. I called out to Madison. "Hey, did you see this?" She came running, eyes wide. "What the?" "Those aren't ours," she said, looking at her socks and shoes. I checked my own, but neither of us had any red on us. The rest of the girls were equally puzzled. No one was hurt, no one was bleeding, and yet these footprints were vivid, bright red, and impossibly real. They didn't continue past my door. It was as if they were waiting for someone or marking me. The warden, Mrs. Caldwell, came to investigate. She examined the floor carefully. "This is strange," she said, frowning. "It's not paint, it's not ink. It almost looks like blood. But no one is missing. No one is injured. I've never seen anything like this. I tried to convince myself it was a prank. Maybe some senior was trying to scare us. But there was no evidence. No one was caught. No cameras captured anything unusual, and the footprints weren't on any other floors. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the emergency light made me jump. Around 2:45 a.m., I heard soft footsteps outside my door. My heart skipped a beat. I held my breath, trying to make sense of it. The footsteps stopped. Then a faint whisper floated through the corridor. "Look, see me." I grabbed my phone and flashlight, preparing myself. Slowly, I opened the door. The hallway was empty. But then I noticed something chilling. Fresh red footprints had appeared outside my door, identical to the ones from that morning. They led to my room and stopped, just like before. I ran to wake Madison, but she hadn't seen anything yet. Together, we decided to check the CCTV footage from the corridor. When we reviewed it, we froze. The footage showed nothing unusual. No one had walked down the hallway. No shadows, no figures. Just the footprints appearing out of nowhere. Over the next few nights, the same phenomenon occurred. Red footprints would appear outside my door in the early hours, always stopping right at my threshold. Sometimes I thought I could hear soft, dragging noises or faint whispers calling my name. Madison never heard them. Only I did. I tried leaving my room overnight, staying with friends, but the prints always appeared by morning. No one else in the dorm experienced it. The footprints seemed personal. They followed me. I started documenting every detail. Every night I stayed in room 212. Sometimes the footprints would be slightly larger, sometimes smaller, as if whoever or whatever was leaving them was playing with me. The whispers grew more distinct, almost urging me to open the door in the middle of the night. I never did. I was too terrified to confront it, but the footprints, vivid and crimson, continued. Over time, other students whispered about room 212, calling it haunted, cursed, or simply dangerous. Eventually, I transferred to another dorm. The red footprints stopped appearing outside my door, but I could never shake the memory. Even now, whenever I see red stains or splatters anywhere, my heart races. I think about those footprints on the polished corridor floor of Hawthorne College, stopping right at my door, as if whatever left them was still watching, waiting for me to return. Story number 9. I had just moved into Willow Creek dorm at Briarwood University in Vermont. The building was over 100 years old, the kind of place where the walls seemed to remember every sound, every secret. My room was at the far end of the second floor, right next to the emergency stairwell. The first few nights were uneventful, except for the usual creaks and groans of an old building settling in the cold night air. My roommate, Sarah, was a night owl, usually up late on her laptop, so I always felt a little safer knowing someone was awake. But one night, around 1:30 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Slow, steady, faint, but getting closer. I froze under my blanket, listening as they approached my door. They stopped right outside. I held my breath, waiting for a knock. None came. Then I heard it. Soft and high-pitched, like the giggle of a little girl. It was faint but clear, and my blood turned to ice. There were no children in this dorm. This was a college building. I stayed perfectly still until morning, barely daring to breathe. When Sarah woke, I asked her if she had heard anything. She shook her head. I was asleep the whole time. You sure it wasn't someone on the floor messing around? I wanted to believe that, but the sound had been too close, too deliberate. The next night, It happened again. Footsteps stopping right outside my door. Silence, then that giggle. This time, louder, like it was teasing me, daring me to open the door. I finally worked up the courage to look through the peephole. The hallway was empty, not a soul in sight. But as I backed away, I heard the giggle again right behind the door, as if someone had their face pressed against it. I barely slept after that. A few nights later, things escalated. At exactly 1:47 a.m., the footsteps came as usual. But this time, my door creaked softly. I had locked it. I was sure of it. But it shifted open an inch, just enough to let in a cold draft. And then I heard it. The giggle. Inside the room. I grabbed my phone flashlight and swung it toward the sound, but saw nothing. Sarah woke up to me, standing on my bed, shaking. The door just opened by itself, I whispered. She got up and checked, but the hallway was empty. The next morning, I begged the dorm supervisor, Mrs. Hill, to check the security cameras. When she did, the footage made my stomach drop. It showed my door slowly creaking open at 1:47 a.m. But there was no one there. No hand, no figure, nothing. That night, I tried to stay awake. The footsteps came again, followed by the giggle. I clutched my phone, recording everything. For a moment, I swore I saw a shadow, small, childlike, pass across the room before vanishing. By the end of the week, I couldn't take it anymore. I moved out of that room and into another dorm across campus. The giggles stopped. But even now, whenever I wake up at night and hear the faint sound of footsteps, I remember that laugh. Playful, innocent, and so very wrong. And I know if I ever go back to Willow Creek dorm, the giggles will start again, right outside my door. Story number 10. When I transferred to Ravenwood College in Salem, Massachusetts, I was thrilled. The campus was stunning. Red brick buildings, ivy-covered walls, and a girls' dorm that looked more like a historic mansion than student housing. My room was on the second floor, close to the main staircase. But from the very first night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The dorm had a section known as the North Wing, permanently locked and blocked by a heavy wooden door with a chain across it. Everyone called it the Forbidden Wing. Rumor had it that years ago, a fire had destroyed part of it, and it was never renovated. But at night, the footsteps started, slow, echoing, and always leading toward that locked door. The first few times, I brushed it off as other girls moving around. Until one night, the building was silent, except for those footsteps. I sat up in bed, listening, as they moved right past my room and stopped at the North Wing door. And then I heard it. The sound of the door handle rattling, as if someone was trying to get in. The next morning, I asked around. My roommate, Chloe, said she'd never heard anything. No one goes near that wing, she told me. Most of the girls won't even walk past it at night, but the footsteps didn't stop. Every night, right around 2 a.m., they would begin again, always ending at the locked door. And then I started having dreams. In them, I saw a girl standing at the far end of the North Wing, her back to me, her hair long and dark. When she turned, I woke up, heart racing, drenched in sweat. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I waited until everyone was asleep, then crept to the North Wing door with a flashlight. The chain was still in place, but when I touched it, I realized it wasn't actually locked, just looped to look secure. I hesitated for a long moment, then unhooked it and pushed the door open. The air inside was icy cold, smelling of dust and something faintly metallic. I stepped inside. The hallway was long and narrow, lined with old rooms filled with broken furniture and boxes of forgotten belongings. My footsteps echoed unnaturally loud. At the very end of the corridor was a room with the door slightly ajar. Inside, moonlight from a cracked window illuminated something on the wall. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was a faded black and white photograph of a girl. Her clothes were old-fashioned, her hair tied back, and she looked exactly like me. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, but not mine. Someone was walking down the hallway toward me, slow and deliberate. I turned off my flashlight and hid in the corner of the room. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped right outside the door. And then, a whisper. "Come back." I bolted. I sprinted out of the north wing, re-looped the chain, and ran back to my room. Chloe woke up to me, slamming the door behind me, shaking uncontrollably. The next morning, I went back with daylight streaming through the windows. The photograph was gone. The room was empty. To this day, I don't know what I saw, or who left that photograph. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the footsteps leading to the north wing. I never follow them anymore, because I know that whatever is in there is still waiting for me. Story number 11. It was late September when Emily moved into Hollow Creek Hostel in Oregon. The place looked ordinary enough during the day. Red brick walls, creaky staircases, dusty old portraits lining the hallway. But at night, it became strangely silent, as if the entire building was holding its breath. Emily had been there for only 3 nights when she first heard it. It was just after 2:30 a.m. She was half asleep when faint footsteps echoed in the corridor outside her room. They weren't rushed footsteps. They were slow, deliberate. Each step sounded like it was getting closer, stopping just outside her door. Then, silence. Her roommate Sophie stirred awake. "You heard that too?" Sophie whispered. Emily nodded, but stayed quiet. They listened for another minute, waiting for the sound of retreating footsteps. But there was nothing. The next night, it happened again, exactly at the same time. Slow, dragging footsteps down the hallway. Stop. Silence. Emily's unease grew stronger with every passing night. She asked the hostel's night guard, an older man named Carl, if he'd heard anything. He was tall, with tired eyes and a deep voice that always sounded heavy, as though he had too much on his mind. Carl simply shrugged and said, "Old buildings make noises." But Emily noticed something strange. When she mentioned the footsteps, he wouldn't meet her eyes. Over the next week, the footsteps became more frequent, not just at 2:30, but sometimes at 3 a.m., sometimes just before dawn. One night, Emily decided she couldn't take it anymore. She stayed awake, sitting on her bed, waiting. At exactly 3:15 a.m., the sound came again. One footstep after another. Closer, 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 until it stopped right outside her door. Heart pounding, Emily gathered the courage to get up, cross the room, and twist the doorknob. When she opened the door, the hallway was empty. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, she confronted Carl again. "You know something?" she said. "You've been here for years, haven't you? What's going on here at night?" Carl looked at her for a long moment, then let out a heavy sigh. "I wasn't going to say anything," he muttered. "It's not my place to scare the new girls." He motioned for her to follow him to the common room. Sophie joined them, equally curious. Carl sat down, his hands clasped tightly together, and after a long pause, he spoke. 15 years ago, there was a girl here named Claire. She stayed in room 4B, the room right across from yours. She disappeared one night. Some say she ran away, others said she was taken, but Carl's voice faltered. I was the last person who saw her alive. Emily's stomach twisted. She came running to me that night, terrified. She said someone had been following her for weeks. I told her to calm down, told her it was probably nothing, just her imagination. Then, later that night, I heard screams coming from her room. By the time I got there, Carl swallowed hard, his hands trembling. There was blood in the hallway, but no Claire. The police searched for weeks but never found her body. And every night since then, I hear her footsteps. Always during my shift. Always stopping outside the room she vanished from. Emily's heart raced. You're saying that's Claire? Carl nodded. Sometimes I think she's still trying to get help. Sometimes I think she's still running from whoever killed her. That night, Emily could barely breathe as she waited for the sound to come again. And it did. The same slow footsteps, closer, closer. But this time, something was different. The footsteps didn't stop outside her door. They moved past her room, down the hallway, toward the locked storage room at the very end. Then came a soft knock. Emily's blood ran cold. She peeked out of her room just in time to see the handle of the storage room door turn, even though no one was there. The door creaked open by itself. Inside was darkness so thick it felt alive. And then, faintly, she heard a voice. A girl's voice whispering from inside the storage room. "Help me." The sound of running footsteps followed. Loud, frantic, and then silence. Emily slammed her door shut, heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears. She and Sophie huddled together until morning. When they told Carl what they heard, his face turned pale. "The storage room," he repeated. "That room's been locked for years. No one has the key except the warden." They went to check that morning. The storage room door was wide open. Inside, lying in the dust, was a single old shoe. A girl's shoe, faded and torn. Emily never stayed in the hostel another night. But before she left, she asked Carl what he thought had happened. "She wants someone to find the truth," he said quietly. "And until someone does, she'll keep walking these halls." And sure enough, even as Emily wheeled her suitcase down the corridor for the last time, she heard it, soft, dragging footsteps following behind her. She didn't dare look back. Story number 12. When Jessica moved into Crestwood Women's Hostel in Seattle, she thought it would be the perfect place to focus on her studies. The building was old but cozy, with creaky wooden floors and pale yellow hallway lights that buzzed softly at night. She shared her room with two other girls, Mia and Harper, who quickly became her friends. For the first few days, everything felt normal. Late-night gossip, snacks in bed, and laughing about the hostel's so-called haunted history. The older girls always joked about footsteps in the hallways and shadows outside their rooms. Jessica brushed it off as silly scare tactics to spook new students. But on the fourth night, something strange happened. Jessica woke up to the faint sound of footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, almost careful, as if someone didn't want to be heard. They came from the far end of the hallway, one step at a time, drawing closer. She lay frozen in bed, heart pounding. Mia stirred awake. "Jess, did you hear that?" Before Jessica could answer, the footsteps stopped, right outside their door. The room went dead silent. Jessica slowly turned her head toward the door, expecting to hear a knock or a handle turning. Instead, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A shadow, a perfectly clear human-shaped shadow, stretched under the thin gap at the bottom of the door, as though someone was standing there, completely still. Her breath caught in her throat. The shadow didn't move. It didn't shuffle. It just stayed there. Mia whispered, "Who is that?" They waited for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, the shadow slid away, as if the person had turned and walked back down the hall. Jessica finally gathered the courage to jump out of bed and open the door. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no sound, no sign of anyone. The next day, Jessica asked the night guard about it. He frowned and said he hadn't seen anyone in that part of the hostel during his rounds. "Maybe you were dreaming," he suggested. But Jessica knew what she saw. The following night, she stayed awake, determined to prove she wasn't imagining things. She kept her phone ready, flashlight in hand, eyes fixed on the door. At 3:07 a.m., the footsteps started again. This time, Jessica crept out of bed and tiptoed closer to the door. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The steps came closer, closer, then stopped. The shadow appeared again. It stood there, perfectly still. Jessica pressed record on her phone camera, her hands trembling. She watched as the shadow seemed to lean forward, as though whoever or whatever was listening through the door. Suddenly, the doorknob rattled violently, making her stumble back. Her roommate screamed, but when Jessica yanked the door open, the hallway was empty. Again, her phone had stopped recording. The video was corrupted, nothing but static. By the fifth night, Mia refused to stay in the room. She moved into another room down the hall, leaving Jessica and Harper behind. Harper tried to act tough, saying it was probably some girl playing a prank, until she saw it for herself. That night, the shadow returned, but this time, it didn't leave. Jessica and Harper sat frozen as the shadow stayed outside the door for nearly 5 full minutes, unmoving. Then, slowly, it crouched. Jessica's blood turned to ice as the shape grew smaller, as if the figure was bending down to peek under the door. She could almost make out the shape of a head and shoulders, almost see its face pressed to the floor. Jessica grabbed the nearest object, a heavy textbook, and threw it against the door. The shadow vanished instantly. The next morning, Jessica told the hostel warden. The woman's face went pale, and after a long pause, she said quietly, "Your room used to belong to a girl named Rachel. She went missing last winter. The police think she was taken by someone who used to watch her through the door at night." They never found who it was. Jessica's heart sank. That night, she packed her bags, determined to leave first thing in the morning. But as she sat awake one last time, the footsteps came again. This time, they didn't stop at her door. They passed by slowly, heading toward the far end of the hallway, and stopped outside Mia's new room. Jessica felt a wave of dread crash over her. She ran into the hallway, screaming for Mia to wake up. When she reached Mia's door, there was no shadow under it, but the door itself was already slightly open. Inside, Mia was sitting upright in bed, wide-eyed, pointing at the floor. There, just under the bed, was the faint outline of a shadow, perfectly still, and then it moved. The door slammed shut on its own, plunging them all into darkness. What happened next, Jessica never told anyone. She left Crestwood Hostel the next morning and never came back. But sometimes, even now, she swears she still sees a shadow standing outside her bedroom door at 3 a.m. Story number 13. When Emily Harper moved into Ridgeview Women's Hostel in Portland, Oregon, she was just excited to have her own space. The building was old but cozy, with faded wallpaper and creaky wooden stairs that groaned every time someone walked up or down. She shared her room with Chloe, another nursing student, and for the first few days, everything felt normal. But the first night, Emily was woken up by something that didn't feel normal at all. It was just past 2:15 a.m. when she heard it. Soft crying, faint but unmistakable, coming from the hallway. She froze in bed, clutching the blanket, her ears straining. The crying sounded like a young woman, heartbroken, sitting just outside their door. Emily sat up and whispered, "Chloe, do you hear that?" Chloe groaned sleepily and rolled over. Probably someone crying over a breakup. "Go back to sleep." Emily tried, but she couldn't shake the sound from her mind. The next night, the crying came again. Same time, same place, and the night after that. By the fourth night, Emily pressed her ear to the door. The crying was louder now, almost as if whoever was out there was sitting right against the door. Then she heard a whisper, "Please, help me." Emily's blood ran cold. She threw the door open, but the hallway was empty. The next morning, Emily asked the hostel manager about it, but she brushed it off. "You girls are just spooking yourselves. This is an old building. It makes noises." But the crying kept coming. One night, Emily decided she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed a flashlight and followed the sound. It led her up the narrow back staircase to the hostel's rooftop terrace. The terrace was empty, except for a small weathered diary lying near the wall. Emily knelt down and flipped it open. The name on the inside cover was Lily Thompson, a girl who had stayed in the hostel 3 years ago. Emily sat under the weak glow of the terrace, light and red. The entry started out normal. Lily writing about classes, friends, and the hostel. But as Emily turned the pages, the tone changed. Lily's handwriting grew shaky, her words darker. I hear them whispering at night. I hear footsteps in the hall. I can't sleep anymore. No one believes me. The final entry chilled Emily to her core. Tonight, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to the terrace. If anyone finds this, tell them I just wanted the noise to stop. Emily's hands trembled. The crying that night was deafening. It wasn't faint anymore. It was right outside her door. Chloe heard it too and sat up in bed, terrified. Then came a knock, slow, repeated. Emily's heart raced as she grabbed the diary and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but muddy, barefoot footprints stretched all the way toward the stairs leading up to the terrace. Emily followed them, shaking. When she reached the terrace door, it creaked open by itself. Inside, the air was ice cold. And then she saw her, a girl in a soaked white nightgown, standing by the edge of the terrace. Her hair dripping wet, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. Emily's voice cracked. Lily. The girl stopped crying and slowly turned her head. Her face was pale, hollow-eyed, tears streaming down her cheeks. Stay with me, Lily whispered. Emily's flashlight flickered and went out. The last thing she saw before running back down the stairs was Lily stepping closer, her bare feet leaving wet prints behind. Emily and Chloe moved out of Ridgeview Hostel the next morning, leaving all of their things behind. Months later, Emily still wakes up some nights to the sound of faint crying, even though she now lives hundreds of miles away.